Tebow going on his own. He gets the try.
The Red 78.
We're both Munster people.
Carberry gets over the line. Try from Munster.
Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
Hello and welcome along. I'm Alan Quinlan and you're listening to episode 64 of the Red 78 here on the Rugby channel, and with me as always is Niamh Briggs. Not a great weekend for Munster or the Irish women either, Niamh, so it was a tricky one looking back, analysing both those games. We'll start with your results and game in Wales. It was disappointing, a lot of optimism going into the game. And excitement, a little bit unknown as well, and we spoke about it last week, how good Wales potentially could be and what they were going to bring to the party. So it was a hard one to pick yourselves up from, but just what was your take on it?
Yeah, we were incredibly disappointed as a whole group, I think, after the game. I don't think we envisaged the physicality that Wales and the speed that Wales brought, but I don't think we really would have taken into account the fact that we allowed them that time and space in the ball. I think we were passive and a little bit shell-shocked from the very start. And but the big thing, I suppose, that we're taking in, coming through this is the fact that, we worked our way through, we gave away 3 or 4 scrum penalties in the first half, and then by the end of it, we were getting our own penalties back and definitely played better, more like ourselves in the second half. But we had a very, very honest review together as a group on Monday, and sometimes you can be a bit wary about how squads take that and which way it'll be taken. But to be fair to this group, they've very much accepted responsibility in terms of what we need to do to put a better performance on this week. And I think that, number one, that experience, that first game in the Six Nations will be huge for lots of this group. And also we trained really well yesterday, really well today so far. So I think we're just kind of ready to right some wrongs, I think, from our own point of view, just in relation to stuff that we speak about it all the time, our non-negotiables, our ability to be physical, our ability to get off the line, our ability to get off the ground, stuff like that I think we were probably a little bit passive about at the weekend. We just kind of went back into our shells a small bit this weekend. Obviously it's another huge test, but one that we're probably looking forward to a bit now, knowing that we've had that game under our belts, and I think that'll be huge for us.
Will it be hard to pick the players up? There's a lot of younger players and players that Six Nations rugby is new to. Will it be difficult to pick them up? Are they excited and enthusiastic to get out there again and fix the issues and the problems that went wrong?
Yeah, look, I can imagine Monday was definitely difficult for lots of players, for us as coaches as well. We had to go through that game on a fine tooth comb, and it couldn't be a case of loads of things went wrong. It was just a case of, okay, these are the couple of things that we really need to concentrate this weekend to make us better. And to be fair, the players have bought in. There were loads of energy yesterday at training, loads again this morning. So there definitely does seem to be an air of it's calm. There's nobody pressing panic buttons yet. I think they're very aware of the group in terms of, Nicola's the highest cap player in the squad. She's got 30 caps after last weekend, I think. So still a very raw and young group that we've got, and it's unfortunate that they've got to find their way on the international stage. But that's the here and the now, and we've just got to move on, and we've just got to get better. And I hope and I feel that we might have done that. And I think having a home game this weekend is huge. Going to Cork again this weekend is huge for us, and we've got good memories there as a women's group and women's rugby in general. So hopefully, we get a good crowd out to cheer us on.
Is the word patience needed here again? And is it a bit unfortunate, but is it just a reality that people have to be patient? Just reading some comments online, lots of people are positive and behind the team. There's some negativity there. People saying there should be different changes in the team, and it's part of system errors and setups that should have been better years ago. My argument to that, it's a very difficult one for you as a coach, and I'm not pressing you on that. It's difficult because lots of changes were implemented in the review that came out last year, and lots of positive stuff has been happening around women's rugby. And you can't just suddenly, 23 of these Welsh players they're playing in the English Premiership. So is it a case of that is just a reality and you've got to make do with what you have at the moment, get the girls better? And there needs to be a little bit of patience here, because just as I've said, you need all your players probably playing at a high level to really improve and compete and be winning these games. Wales have moved on to a different level.
Yeah, look, no disrespect, I don't think it's a case of we've got to make do. I think we've got players that are more than capable of playing on the international stage.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't.
No, you're fine. But we just got to set standards for ourselves and hold ourselves to account. I think, we just didn't play well in patches. We just got beaten up physically. We were under pressure at our set piece, and we were very lateral in terms of our passing. We were slow and ponderous. So just, there are things that we can fix, irrelevant of whether we're playing the Premiership or we're not. And, it kind of irks me a small bit that if, by saying that loads of Welsh players are playing in the Premiership, it's almost saying that what we do here in Ireland isn't fit for purpose, and that's not the case. There's lots of people working very, very hard behind the scenes to make sure that, from a structure point of view, club game is getting stronger. We've both spoken about it before, that club game needs to continue to get stronger and needs to get better for sure. But I just think that for whatever reason, be it nerves, be it occasion, be it not understanding international test arenas, I think we just got hit by a juggernaut last weekend and we couldn't slow it down. I think we're much more aware of what's coming this weekend, and we've just got to prepare as best for it. And but we've got to hold ourselves to account too as a whole group. We've got to be harder on ourselves in terms of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to get better. And Greg's brilliant at bringing that group together in terms of making them understand, but in terms of the detail, John, Dennis and I have been working incredibly hard to empower those players. But to a certain extent, those players got to keep going in terms of and buying into what we're doing. They've been incredible this week. I'm not sure we could have had a review like it when I was playing. I think we've been very, very honest, both as a playing group to us as coaches and back. And I just think that it's parked now. We've looked at France on Tuesday. We've got our game plan and our structure and plan in place of what we're trying to do. And now we've just got to go and express ourselves. And I think that's going to be really important for us.
Are you confident that the team can obviously, after that review, do a lot better and execute hugely some of those basics better? And I like the fact that you're not making excuses as regards the Premiership. Look, there's a very obvious one. The power and the physicality was something it's hard to kind of, you have to find ways to play against that. If you're even in the men's game, if you're playing against a bigger physical side, you've got to find ways to.
We'll be looking at Munster this weekend. I'd imagine coming up against a huge South African side. It's going to be, if you know what I mean. If you can't match that power, then you've got to be technically astute in everything that you do. And we just weren't. Our breakdown was poor in terms of we just didn't support the ball carrier enough, quickly enough, and low enough to be able to play at a tempo that we want to be able to play at. We've spoken about the set piece already, and you're right. We've just got to be technically better. And look, I'm confident that we'll be able to be more cohesive for sure and put more pace on it. And if we can do that, then we're just definitely in a better stead than what we were last weekend.
Yeah, because if you look at the stats, you had 50% possession. They had probably a nudge in the territory, 60-40. Time and possession, you had more ball than them at times. So anyway, it's hopefully you can pick yourselves up and get back on track. And I know you're playing a very strong French team this week down in Musgrave Park, 3:15 on Saturday. So anyone that is listening and can get out and support the women again on Saturday, and hopefully you can find a performance. Okay, we got to move on. It's not the easy part, Niamh, being a coach when you lose these matches. And people often ask me, well, why don't I coach? And for various different reasons, not that I made a conscious decision. I do coach underage teams and stuff like that. But God, it's a nightmare when you lose these games, isn't it? It's some roller coaster from the high of winning, and then a week later you can lose. But anyway. Very
quickly though, you learn to separate that emotion from the process, and I think that's definitely something I've learned being involved in an environment like this. I think when I was coaching, club and province and stuff like that, you can get caught up in that emotion. But when you come into this where it's just game after game, you just don't have time to feel sorry for yourself. You just got to continue to get better and try and help develop your players. So
you've got to move on quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the best of luck of the weekend. We'll move on to the URC and Munster's game against Glasgow. We've probably been banging the drum for a couple of months about Treviso, Osprey Scarlets and Glasgow. Those 4 games, how pivotal they were to put Munster in a position to maybe be in the playoffs before the last 2 games. So we've 16 games played, and Munster have won 9, lost 7. Saturday was a big disappointment. Obviously, Glasgow were excellent, and they were very, very physical and powerful. They did a lot of their Scottish internationals back, and that first half performance was sublime from them. But when you look back at the performance of Munster and what we've seen the last couple of months from them, they weren't at the races for some particular reason, and it was a very poor result, which now makes it really difficult for them. And most probably they need to go to South Africa now in a couple of weeks. I know they're there this weekend with the Champions Cup, but then they go back in a few weeks. They've got to win one of those games basically, or else they're in danger of possibly missing out in Europe next year, because in the table they've got to finish 7th, you would imagine, because one of the Welsh teams will take that 8th spot. Even if they're not maybe not going to be in the top 8, any of the Welsh teams, but it looks like Cardiff will take the 8th spot. One of them has to be in Europe. So for Munster, they've got to finish at least 7th to be in Europe for next year. So they've given themselves a bit of a mountain to climb. We can go back and look at the start of the season and some of the losses there and games they probably, the way they played from November onwards, they probably would have won some of those games at the start. But it is what it is. They were beaten 38-26. They conceded 5 tries, which is a lot of tries, and they conceded 6 against the Scarlets the previous match. So 11 tries in 2 games. It's a poor return, and probably a bit of a hammer blow for this team, because we've been talking them up, and rightly so, for the last few months. They've been really good. What do you think went wrong? Just we'll have a quick synopsis and then we'll get the fans' reaction. What do you think went wrong at the weekend?
Yeah, it was a funny one, because I thought at times, like when Glasgow scored the first try, Munster had a huge amount of territory and possession in Glasgow's half and looked quite dangerous on the ball, and then you get a sucker punch of a second try and they respond to that one quite well, and then all of a sudden you go in at half time and you find yourself 4 tries down. And it's actually a really good, probably warm up for what's coming this weekend, I think, because I think that the pace at which Glasgow attacked Munster will, put them on the back foot a lot. But I feel like they were so passive. They were so passive in terms of their line speed, their ability to fold around the corner, kind of working in 1s or 2s. I thought, for the Glasgow, I think the second try, players jumping out on the line trying to make big hits and just leaving gaping holes, and and just inaccurate. I think is probably the one thing. I'd imagine they'd be very, very frustrated after that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It was a silenced crowd at half time in Thomond Park, and certainly wasn't what we've seen the last few months. What's the reaction from the fans? We have a lot of people responded to my tweet yesterday that I put out. Will you read out some of them there?
Yeah, look, first of all, I'm going to read out one from David Mack. So he's a Glasgow fan. He said it was a pleasure to attend the match. We've strengthened depth this year, and with all our Scottish internationals returning, things look good. Munster comeback in the second half was superb, had us worried. Great stadium and fans. Hospitality suite was excellent. So I think that's definitely a brighter note for Munster. I think, people are speaking about the defence. Richard Daly's talking about the last 2 games. It's a bit of a concern. Plus the front row seems to be an ongoing challenge. Shane McLaughlin seemed to be a massive disconnect with the players. Was it the break? He's not sure. A simple pass is not going to hand. Not doing the basics. Line out scrum all poor. No base to work off. Need a big improvement for this week. I think that's probably the biggest thing. We speak all the time about platforms. We saw it with the women's squad this weekend, very similar to Munster. Just to have a platform from a set piece. It's very difficult to get any momentum when you're been pinged off the park from a scrummaging point of view, or inaccurate line out where you're giving possession back to the opposition.
Yeah, their set piece was really poor. It was, that execution around first phase ball, something that, Glasgow put brilliant pressure on them. And it's brilliant to have a Glasgow fan listening to the podcast or tuning in. But obviously, they would have been delighted with their performance of the weekend of their players. They were really good. The energy they brought early on and the execution was superb. So, bit of a wake-up call, a learning curve for this Munster group after a positive couple of months.
Yeah, hugely. Joe, attitude in the first half in particular with the breakdown, not good enough. They'll know that themselves, need to bounce back versus the Sharks, shipping a lot of scores of late, and that needs to change. Ray O'Brien, looks like they all celebrated the Grand Slam victory. The atmosphere, despite having a large crowd, seemed quiet. I don't know, is there too much expectation of an easy win against a strong Glasgow team? We didn't turn up first half and had too much to claw back in the second. DF Keane, John Ryan is a massive loss. There appears to be an opinion out there that Munster can't scrum, and referees appear to believe that. Munster must get tough and smarter in the scrums, or other shortcomings last week can be overcome. Do you think there's a trend against Munster's scrum?
Well, it's the kind of pictures you portray and what you deliver. I think it can happen with referees where they speak to each other, they watch videos, they do their own analysis. I don't buy into that too much. Sometimes it can happen that there's a perception in a referee's mind, but Glasgow had a dominant scrum the other night. Xander Fagerson, he's a Scottish international. He put Dave Kilcoyne under a lot of pressure in that first half, and Josh Wycherley in the second half. So they were getting on the front foot, creeping forward, and it's that picture you present. It can happen. And when people are even talking about that stuff online, you've got to make sure that you kind of dispel that myth and that perception that's out there. And that's the best way to do that is being dominant and rock solid and presenting a square picture as a prop. So it does happen a little bit, but they've got to, and they're going to be tested, incredibly tested this weekend. But I think any of the penalties the other night that we saw were, you couldn't argue against them, really.
Yeah. Patrick Malotny, Frisch appears to be vital to this team. His absence left Munster with the young 10 with little game time playing at 12 and the usual 12 out of position at 13. Surely this is the issue. This is the end of Jack playing at 12. I still think there's a space there from John Mackay, a Leinsterman with Connacht roots and a Munster DNA living in London. Who cannot love rugby and not be a Munster fan? Saturday was shocking. Hope it's a weird one-off as we've been playing well. Worrying though, influence of Peter O'Mahony was definitely missed. He wouldn't have stood for it. Throwaway Casey, I think this defence becoming a real worry. Even in recent wins against Scarlets and Benetton, there's been a large number of tries conceded. Once they came up against a very good Glasgow team, they simply couldn't live with them. Attack is still strong, but they need to plug that leaky defence. Mivu, after a pretty good run, the wheels have come off spectacularly. The Munster project is still very much in its relatively early days. I have confidence in the coaches and their ability to progress this new style Munster team, but it's going to take time. I wouldn't have said the wheels are coming off spectacularly. I would have just said it was a bad loss, and it'd be interesting to see how they bounce back. Another one, after Saturday's result, a lot of people are commenting that we won't get a home quarter final. I think there's a real chance we won't make next season's Champions Cup if we don't get anything from our trip to South Africa, which is what you were saying earlier on there. I've one here, sorry, that you might look at from Jared Wallace. Alan will remember back in the day. It's back in the day that I loved.
Back in the day, yeah.
We used to need a poor league performance before going back into the knockout stages of Europe with a heroic performance. The main positive I take from Saturday is the hope that history will repeat itself.
Yeah, hopefully. I do remember that at times when we did have a poor performance the week before Europe. Not always, but I think the problem for Munster here, and it's stating the obvious, the damage is done at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And it gives you no kind of wriggle room at all to have one of these off days, if you like. and to lose a match or two like this at this stage, because you know, some of the losses earlier on were really disappointing and took away that opportunity to have an off day. Not that you want one, but I think they knew what was on the line. I think one of the other things I would say as well is there's 3 games in 5 weeks. So they played the Ospreys 17th of February. Scarlets around the 3rd of March, and then they did 3 weeks. So it's I'm not sure what happened in the 3 weeks. Did the players, you know, there's been a real feel-good factor about the team. You know, we had Andy Kiriakou on last week, and you could sense that positivity and where they're at the moment. Look, they had an off day. I'd love if it was a league game this week rather than Champions Cup, you know, because it's going to be a hard couple of weeks. But look, there's the sentiment there, and the messages are very, very similar. I would say, you know, people are very disappointed. They weren't sharp and hungry enough, in my opinion. And Johnny Fitz, one of the tweeters there, says the same. Just not sharp enough, hungry enough, very disappointing. So there's loads of other tweets we could read out. Apologies to people that we can't get to them all. There is a sense of a little bit of shock and a setback here. The podcast has been positive for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we've talked. We were due. You know what? But look, we'll move on from the tweets. Hopefully they can respond. It just shows people care about the team, and you know, they're very balanced. In fairness, there's no one slating anyone there. The concern and the worry is the leaky tries. Now, if you look at the league table, Munster only second behind Leinster to tries to points conceded, which, you know, points against 311. Leinster are 265. So Munster are second in points conceded in the whole table, which would suggest they should be higher up the table. But their points for is lower. It's 391, or it's 422. But it's in the last 2 matches, the tries that are conceded are a little bit worrying and concerning, which is something they've got to get right. Okay, let's move on just from the tweets. Positives and negatives. For me, I usually throw these out and you can agree or disagree or add to them. Positives, I suppose the reaction in the second half. You know, Munster scored 4 tries. They give themselves a shot at getting back, at, you know, turning this around. But when you're 28-0 down, I think it's incredibly hard to. It's a big score, isn't it? I think
that was us on Saturday too.
Yeah, I know, it's really difficult. Kind of when Munster were 21-0 down, their 3 tries conceded. I think they had a couple of sustained attacks near the Glasgow line, knocked the ball on, turned it over. If they could have got in at half time, 21-7. That's within reaching distance. Because look, Glasgow are a very good side, and the players, you could start naming all their players. They're super players, strong side. Their mentality was really, really to start the game well and blow Munster away, and they did. I think the killer for them was the Violanu try on 60 minutes. That came from Munster making errors in their own half and falling off tackles. That was the one that kind of really said, well, you're not getting back into it. But for Munster, look, they scored 4 tries in that second half. That's a positive. The negatives, scrum was creaky, problems there all night. The line-out execution, poor as well. Whether that's it's probably down to a bit of decision-making, execution of throw, of lift, all that kind of stuff. And obviously Glasgow's good defence. That wasn't good enough. The one that kind of jumps out, and which they've big control in, which I'm sure, and I saw one of the videos there of Graham Roundtree's comments post-match online, talking about the physicality and losing collisions and stuff like that, and maybe attitude. They're two things that's an individual responsibility, and then that feeds into the collective. So physicality wasn't at the races, and I'm not talking about size here and one player being 5 kilos heavier, the opposition player being 5. That wasn't the case. 5 kilos heavier than a Munster player. Munster still had a pretty big side. I think they had a lot more experienced Glasgow and international players playing for them. But the physicality and the attitude is something that irks me. I'm not suggesting that Munster trained badly last week or the week before. They had this blasé attitude that they just turn up. That doesn't happen. But there was a lot of players in that first half looking around, waiting for somebody else to make a hit, waiting for somebody else to carry a ball, not kind of pushing themselves to the levels that we've seen. So they were frustrating. And the energy, the overall energy that first half was, and I think you 23 players here who weren't at the races, bar maybe one or two, maybe 20. And that'll kind of lead us on to the start of the week in a minute. But if you have a lot of players who are just a tiny little bit off, not a conscious decision, has a big effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, huge. I think it always becomes infectious across the team as well. I think that's probably the most frustrating thing as a coach when you see that happening, unfolding, because you can't really do anything about it. You can tactically, you can look at a game and think about a different game plan. You can, talk about different stuff in relation to players and scrum and lineup. But when you're a little bit off, and if the person next to you is a little bit off and the person beside them, then all adds up. And I just felt falling off tackles, not getting, being so passive in the game, in the defensive line, probably just frustrates the life out of any coach. And Glasgow were a really good side, but I think what kind of frustrates me a small bit is that that's at Thomond Park. It's your home. Like, that is, you get further down on an away trip. You're like, okay, look, it's away. It's tough to be there, but that's at home. Almost, a really good crowd. That was just, disappointing from that aspect, that it's coming down to a mental aspect as opposed to anything physical.
Okay, well, we could stay in the game for a long time, but it's very obvious what.
But I wouldn't mind, Quinny. There were some really good tries scored from Munster. Really good ability to move the ball. Looked like really good options. Sometimes we got a bit flat, I thought, and we were just getting smashed by man and ball.
Yeah, so if you go to the obvious ones, like scrum line out and the physicality around the breakdown, that was a problem. So it was much better in the second half, which you'd expect the reaction to come out. So that's something they can take from it. And when they analyze it, I think they'll find lots of frustrating things, guys falling off tackles, timing, line speed. And there was a lot there. It was too much to kind of go, it's just one thing or one area. But they need to collectively try and fix that. If we pick star of the week, it's a tough one when you lose a game like this, which is disappointing. But and it's hard to find, performers there. I thought, look, for me, Craig Casey, when he came on, made a big difference. It's always easier to come on the field when you're down, in the sense that most likely it's going to turn around some bit and there's going to be pace and tempo. You throw caution to the wind, but he was very good when he came on.
He was his tempo, but also we need to understand too, like, things are a little bit sloppy then in relation to that, sloppy in relation to the breakdown, sloppy in relation to a few other little bits. So yeah, look, it was very interesting.
But for me, if I was picking star of the week, whether you agree or not, and this comes down to honesty, attitude, work rate, more than doing anything special in the field, and that would be John Hodnett. I think he was one player going off the field that could really hold his head up high and say that he bust his balls for 80 minutes. And he was very, very, I suppose it's hard to kind of, even for him, thinking, God, I played well as an individual coming off the field. I'm sure he was incredibly disappointed, but he was one that I would pick if I was picking star of the week this week. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, hugely. Look, I think he has this ability that he's always 7/8 when he performs in terms of work rate. He never stops going, and then that little bit of extra is when when we're on top of the team and he gets the ball in space or he gets time on the jackal. That unfortunately wasn't the case this weekend, but he's still 7-ish out of 10 in relation to his work rate. He's constantly putting teams under pressure. He's helping, his support lines are incredible. His ability to break down is so good. And so yeah, I don't think I could for a change. I'm not sure I can disagree with you.
Just one other, there's been a few people, and before we move on to look ahead, because we wrapping this game up and putting it to bed is something that I'm sure the players and coaches want to do. It moves on quickly, as you said, as a coach. Joey Carberry or Jack Crowley at 10. It's something that having the two players in the field, obviously playing one at 12 and one at 10. I'm not sure it's working. It did work at times in the earlier rounds. With Anton Frisch back this week, will Munster go back and have a straight choice between either Jack Crowley or Joey Carberry at 10?
Yeah, they will, definitely. And I'd imagine Joey will be their man. He's been around all season for them because he's not been away internationally. So yeah, I can see Joey starting this weekend, and you're bringing the likes of Crowley off the bench. I do think that there is merit to having both of them on the park at the same time. I do think Crowley has a huge amount of potential in that position. For me though, he just got very flat to the gain line at times, so we didn't get to see him express himself as that playmaking role. Yeah, look, I do think there is merit for both of them, but I'd imagine it'll be Carberry, Fectoa and Frisch this weekend.
Okay, we'll wait and see. Looking ahead to the Champions Cup game versus the Sharks, Munster travelled out yesterday ahead of that big game. It's a tough trip for them. It's a hard draw. They've Conor Murray back in the squad, Peter O'Mahony back in the squad, Anton Frisch. They brought 28 players out to South Africa with them. A similar question I would ask you to start. How hard is it to pick up players like this, or will they be able to kind of self-manage and get their attitude right this week and train well and focus and get a performance, do you think?
Yeah, hugely. Look, it's different gravy this weekend. You're talking about away to South Africa and Champions Cup. You know yourself, things always go up a notch when you're up against teams that you're not really expected to beat in terms of on paper or in terms of form, more than anything. I thought Sharks were really poor last weekend. I thought they were really, really poor. And I think that Munster have a huge opportunity to go and win this game. So I think knowing that they also, you know what I mean, that they have a lot that they can improve on themselves as a group, but also knowing that pressure will be very different. Putting the likes of Peter O'Mahony, Conor Murray, and back into that mix as well. Two huge leaders that can drive standards and drive the way that Munster want to play, and a bit of a hardened edge in relation to both of 100 caps or whatever for Ireland. You know what I mean? So players of that caliber within this squad make a huge difference. Yeah, I do think that you'll see a different mentality this weekend.
Yeah, you can't rely on Peter O'Mahony or Conor Murray to come back in and change attitude. They've got to do that themselves, and I think it was a learning curve last weekend. I think it's a shame for them because look, they've got a wake up call as well. You're playing a side this weekend that, look, if I name some of the players, I know people listening will know, but Oxen Che in the front row, Ombanami, the hooker for South Africa, Thomas du Toit, who played for Munster, Eben Etzebeth, Sia Khaleesi, Vincent Chiduka, Boutelezi at number 8. That's a serious pack. And Van Heerden in the second row. That's serious strength, serious power. Hendricks at 9. Mapimpi, Lucanu Am is back playing with them. Werner Koch on the wing, both at Chamberlain full back. That was the team that they picked last weekend against the Scarlets. And I was a bit surprised when I looked because I saw the results. They were beaten 32-20 by the Scarlets, which is, a brilliant result for Scarlets there. Great performance from them. Sharks were poor off it a little bit themselves. So they probably have their own kind of motivation to turn it around this week. But when you name some of those players, Niamh, they're incredibly powerful, seasoned internationals. Munster are going to find a different Sharks team this weekend after their reaction. But just go back to the Sharks results in the Champions Cup. Round 1, they beat Quins 39-31 at home. They went to Bordeaux and they won 19-16 in round 2. In round 3, they beat Bordeaux 32-3 at home. And then they lost their fourth game in 39-29 to Harlequins in London. So they had 3 wins, 1 loss in those first pool games. Are they a side that do you think want to win this competition? Will be different this weekend? Are you expecting a different reaction from them?
Yeah, hugely. It was interesting. I met with the ref from that game in Cardiff afterwards, after our game, and he was very surprised at how poor they were. Not poor in terms of like poor playing, but in terms of just cohesiveness. So I'm pretty sure you're taking the similar, to Munster in relation to the fact that they'll be, at home, and that'll be a huge lift for them. They don't have to travel. Traveling to Wales is a tough break for them. So that'll definitely stand to them. And you'd imagine things will go up a notch in relation to what they're doing in terms of knowing the Champions Cup is very much different to URC. It's going to be a huge battle. And but I do think Munster have the ability to go and get a result there. I really do.
In warm conditions, it's 26, 27 degrees there at the moment. So Niall Scannell is back in the squad as well. I presume he will start. He'll certainly help. He's been out for a couple of weeks, so it'll be interesting. I don't think there'll be too many changes. I think the changes that probably you'll see are at hooker. Conor Murray probably come back into the side. We can debate the Craig Casey one, Conor Murray. Who knows whether Craig Casey will start? Conor Murray will be on the bench. Who knows? And the out half one. I have a sneaky feeling.
They go with Jack, do you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Joey Carberry the weekend was quite deep at times again. And look, you can't single out one player, and I'm not trying to here, but I just don't know if it's the way to go, playing both of them together. I think we saw it a bit at the start. We'll see. They've got to find a different level of aggression this week, because if they don't start this game 100%. Well, and stats can lie. If you look back at the stats of the match, again, the stats in your game, Niamh, Munster had 60% possession, lots of defenders beaten, 67% territory. If you look at these stats, one area did 16 missed tackles, Glasgow at 17. They were in the 20s, but it was just those crucial clinical moments that Glasgow had in that first half. Yeah. And Munster's penalty count was 7. It was quite low. So the stats really
getting better
aren't bad. It was just those pivotal moments early in that game, in that first half, that made the difference for Glasgow. And again, there's no excuses here. Glasgow were superb, and they've done a brilliant job there, and they've put themselves, you would imagine, in the driving seat for that 4th spot in a home quarter final. Unless Munster go and win the 2 games in South Africa. I have to give a mention to Connacht, because a number of weeks ago they were out of the picture here, and now they're up to 6th and 4 points behind Munster, and they play Cardiff and Glasgow in their last 2 games.
They have an easier running.
Well, they play Cardiff at home and they're away to Glasgow, so you've got to tip your hat to Connacht and say, Brilliant. They played Edinburgh at the weekend, Niamh. They had all their internationals back, and they blew Edinburgh away.
Yeah, so they were good. I got to see some of their highlights. So
anyway, they deserve credit for that. Okay, well, look, you've got to get back to training and get going again, and pick the players up. Hopefully Munster can get a performance this week. As I said, I wish it was a league game, but winning and getting back on track could be brilliant for them. If they're beaten, I still think we need a performance. You need something you can take out of this, because it's going to be a really difficult game for anyone playing a team like that in South Africa, irrespective of how they played in Wales last weekend. They're going to be a different side this weekend. Hopefully Munster will be a different side as well, and they can bounce back. That's it for episode 64 of the Red 78. Good luck for the rest of the week, and particularly on Saturday in your match, Niamh against France. Thank you again, and talk to you next week.
Thanks, Quinny.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
I'd like to think I know a lot.